Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Battle Buddy Podcast. You're going to really want to tune into this, especially if you're in the military and you're looking to transition anytime, maybe in the next 6 months, a year at least, preferably probably a couple years out. You might want to pay attention to some of these things because the conversation today is all about transition and some of the problems and issues that can come up with transition. So, my guest today has been through quite a few of them. He's going to share a lot about the things that he went through, hopefully, save you a lot of headaches and whatnot. So, we'll just dive right into it.
Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
Welcome, Jeffrey. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show. It's an
Yeah,
honor.
no problem. I'm excited to talk about this because this is something that every veteran goes through. And I guess I should probably preface this just because I know some of the topics might be a little stressful for some people to hear. So I'll give that trigger warning if for anybody if you're struggling out there. If you hear something and it kind of hits you in the feels in one way, shape, or form, right? And you need a little extra help or you're feeling down. Remember the suicide prevention lifeline number is 988. Press 1. So I'll keep that scrolling here for a minute. But Jeffrey, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who were you growing up? What you do in the military? Those kind of things.
Yeah, happy to do so. So, I grew up in Chicago, and like many of my fellow veterans, brothers and sisters, I say probably mostly on the enlisted side, we come from, naturally, of course, of a diverse group of backgrounds, but, all of us come from troubled backgrounds, broken families, you know, uh, poverty, things like that. So, my story wasn't unique in that by that right. Grew up in the projects in Chicago at a very early age, had to really, find creative ways to, put bread on the table. Kind of raised my sister from age nine, since I was age nine, my baby sister, and kind of took care of home. So there was that kind of upbringing, and then as soon as I turned 18, got out on my own. Soon after that, had a family of my own, and you know, with the GED, such opportunities were few, and wanted to provide a future for my daughter, my family. I joined the Navy at 20. I started doing telemarketing first. Before that, I was doing telemarketing from age 17. Um, that just wasn't sustainable, especially for the goals that I had. So I joined the Navy at 20, and I knew that day that I signed up, I was staying for at least 20. That was my plan. I figured I'm gonna have to work for somebody for 20 years. Who else is gonna give my butt a paycheck for the rest of my life just for waking up? After just 20 years of work. I mean, I could take the butt whoopings. I could, I could take adversity. I grew up taking those. So I'm like, bring it because I need this. I need a career and I need a pension and I need something long term. That's going to be, like I said, sustainable. So with my ASVAB score, again, I had a GED. I scored a 50, which is the recruiter told me I had two possibilities. I could be a corpsman or a cook. I chose corpsman, and that really shaped everything that I've done since then and everything that I'm doing now. And I wouldn't trade an ounce of that. So you see the 8404 behind me. That's Fleet Marine Force, FMF Corpsman. And so that was that's what probably one of the things I'm most proud of. Being a corpsman, the duties that I had serving with the Marines most of that time, and then ultimately making chief as a corpsman. Not an easy feat, but I was determined to do so, and made a lot of sacrifices, personal and otherwise, to finally reach that. A lot of deployments, a lot of time overseas. Um, you know, Friends come and gone. Some lost. Yeah, um, that's what. But I tell you what, being a corpsman took me all around healthcare. Those 22 years, and it just took me all from patient care to ward care, clinical care, medical regulating, logistics, career counseling, even recruiting. My last 3 years, I did health professions recruiting. I learned so much as a corpsman, and that's where once I retired, I finished up my bachelor's degree in healthcare management, and then went on to get a master's in health informatics. And so pretty much my entire adult life has been healthcare.
Awesome. I would think that you probably made a pretty good choice there on the going the corpsman route versus the cook route. You know,
I would
because
like to say,
I think my personal opinion, you either liked the cooks or you hated the cooks. You know, it's like, man, all right, the food they got today is great, man. They got the good food, or you walk in and you're like, what is this?
either way, you
You
want to be on the
know?
good side. Either way, you want to be on the good side.
Exactly. Like, you want that hookup? Yeah, you don't want to get on their bad side, right? They're
Who's
cooking your
corpsman
food.
is
They
next?
might
First,
undercook it or overcook it. The corpsman's there for you. Always there for you when you need them. The cooks, I don't know. Don't hate me, cooks out there. Don't send me no hate mail. We do love you when you cook the good food, but when you cook the
right?
crappy stuff, we like you on surf and turf night.
Oh, we
We
love
don't
you.
like you on whatever that sloppy, soupy mystery food night is.
I'll never forget green eggs and spam in boot camp.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
Yeah, that's
Just
one of
just
my.
like the omelet MREs.
Oh,
It always blew my mind. I love eggs. I love breakfast food. It's my favorite meal. I have no idea how some people ate that. I
oh
still
no.
could not bring myself to eat that. There was no way. I
I,
would take them.
oh, we
Just
had
the
some
just
MRE
the
gourmets in the field. They
yeah.
taste good.
I would take them only because I had the good stuff with it. I had the. I remember I did they have the Pop Tarts and the Skittles and I don't know, like it had all the extra goodies, like the really good stuff in it, but the meal sucked. You know. Then
I tell you
again,
what, some
nothing's better than
key,
the spaghetti with the blackberry cobbler. That's the best. Personal preference. But
nice. How about the five fingers of death?
Five Fingers of Death. I'm
Yeah,
not.
the weenies, the beans.
Oh gosh,
Yes.
no. No. Yeah, I don't know how they classify some of those MREs as food. I really don't. But it, I guess it's kept us alive, right?
Hey, it was chock full of calories. We needed to
Yeah,
get through the day and do what we had to do.
yeah. You gotta do what you gotta do. So, oh man. So, like I said in my intro, we all, regardless of how long you serve, we all go through the transition. And I've talked to so many people about transition. Some people get out and it just everything clicks and works perfect for them. Other people struggle.
Yeah.
So, what was some of your struggles, through transition?
Yeah. So, first of all, my plan was to stay for 30 years. I did 22 of my plan was to stay for 20, for 30. Um, I ended up, I ended up having to get out at 22, retire at 22. Thankfully, I did have some education under my belt. I didn't have my bachelor's yet, but unlike so many others who transitioned out, I had a pretty good grasp of being able to, put together everything in my service record, my education, my training, my certificates, my evals, fit reps, and being able to translate that into a resume that would make sense to a potential employer on the outside. There's so much to tackle just with that piece of it alone. And the TAP class, the transition assistance class, I get that they do what they can, what they got, but I think they can the military can put a whole lot more thought and planning into that because you consider, you know, people like myself who come from, well, many of the people who join when they're young, right out of high school, or and or very soon after that, and they don't have a whole lot of experience under their belts, so they haven't, probably written resumes and cover letters and things like that. And they probably haven't thought about that next step after the military. What am I going to do and plan for it? Um, so if with like I said, so the transition class, they cover resume, writing things like that, and interviewing, and they had people come and talk to us. And some people, from clothing stores, that would offer discounts on suits and things like that. They offered a workshop, during the week, and on I think some weekends, to help with those services. But you kind of really preparing after the fact when you have a short trigger to pull when you got to find a way to put bread on the table, and quickly, especially if you're not, first, if you're not retiring with a pension, you need to, find a job in short order. You're kind of under the gun, and you're not really focused that much on, trying to learn how to write a resume at that point.
Right, there's a lot of people that get out that have no plan, or yeah, they've
Yeah,
got no medical retirement, no, time-based retirement, nothing. Get
Exactly.
out. There's no paycheck in 2 weeks.
And many with families too. And
Oh yeah,
so, as a chief, with many young sailors, under my charge, and I would never try to talk anybody out of leaving the military, but I would sit down with them and really have a very uh, intentional conversation with them, and ask them to consider, what they're making, both tangible and intangible, and what they're earning on active duty. And that includes their health care. That includes, the BAH, and all these things that, they're what they're actually earning and what they're being covered for, and what they would need to earn on the outside, to match that, to at the very least match that, to maintain the standard of living. And that's it. Break out a calculator, get some paper out. We sit and we do the math on it, and we kind of map their current skills, and what that and look at compared to what they would be qualified for on the outside. And that, again, I wasn't trying to talk anybody into or out of, but it kind of it left them with an informed decision to make, if that makes
that's
sense.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but
You
everybody
know,
doesn't get that. And I would, and I had the luxury, the blessing of being able to catch them when they were thinking maybe 6 months to a year out, from transition. And then if they really had their heart set on, on separating, fine, God bless you, and I'm wishing you all the best. But they had, at least they could start planning for it, and with that new information that they had.
absolutely. I've heard a lot of people say that you really should start planning at least 2 years out.
Absolutely.
I've said a few times you should start planning for your exit from the military from the time you join.
Yeah.
You should be taking advantage of the education benefits, learn everything there is in your job, build all these skills, track all these, go to every course that you could possibly take, all this stuff, right? You should be planning that with the end goal of knowing that eventually your time is up.
I'm
Could be
so
four
glad
years,
you
could be
mentioned
20,
that.
but with purpose. Do your career with purpose.
I'm
Some people
so glad
do
you said
20
that.
years and do nothing.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, and here's why. Because those long deployments, especially the ones we're out at sea, we got time to kill, but we also have access to resources, internet, and things like that. I catch them in the various rooms, playing video games and whatnot. I'm like, okay, well, what have you done, to prepare for your life out after the Navy? What happens if you get medically retired? What happens if you get injured and you can't do it anymore? How about what are you doing with off-duty education? What are you doing for your quals? Warfare designations, and all the, um, online courses they offer. Well, they gave us access to courses from Harvard Business School. I took every one that I could. Seriously, I took a number of courses.
See,
My service record is stacked chock full of those kinds of courses.
that's how you do it, though. You think forward of like, oh, Harvard. Why would you not take something from Harvard?
And it's free. Are you kidding me? And then I used what's that? The TA, the
Transition assistance.
no,
Uh,
for the
or the
education while you're going to
uh,
school and active duty.
yeah,
Uh,
I was thinking of
tuition assistance.
tuition assistance. That's it. Yeah.
Yes, I used every bit of that I could, because I was always thinking, I took classes with University of Phoenix and some other universities, all while deployed. Of course, I worked on, got FMF, surface warfare and air warfare. I didn't waste any time. I guess I didn't know how much time I had.
Yeah, I mean, some people might have enough time to crank out 2 or 3 courses in a semester. Maybe it's just one. Maybe it's just 1 or 2 courses for the whole year. Who knows?
You
But
do
yeah,
what you can, though.
exactly. I think. I mean, an associate's degree should take you about 2 years.
Hmm.
So if you do a 4-year enlistment, you should be able to at least knock out your general education
At the
part of
very
that,
least,
at the very least.
or at least all the core, for a bachelor's.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's enough time if you really buckle down and do it. You could do it. You know, I mean, I finished my bachelor's degree off last year. It took me 3 years.
Hmm.
As a full time student. I already had an associate's before that. I had
Yeah.
to go take some extra courses and stuff like that, but it still took 3 years full time while running a business and this podcast and stuff like that. It's like, so you can do it. You can do it when you're in uniform.
Yeah, there's no
You
reason,
definitely have time.
absolutely no reason not to.
Yep.
So, but there are a number of things to get in our way. Again, we come from varying backgrounds, and and a lot of them come from unstable, households and everything. It wasn't instilled in a lot of us. So that wasn't like, that's not really muscle memory for many of us that are transitioning. And so, many won't think, that far ahead. Some people just plan for, the day or the next day. And that's one thing I like to impart upon our brothers and sisters. Just plan, plan, plan. If you don't, plan to fail to plan to fail, that kind of thing. And it just gives you, and one, it gives you more confidence. It does, as you're not, and what the hell mode, when that day does come for you to, get out, and you have a reasonable amount of hope and, and confidence towards that next part of your life, the next chapter. Um, but again, it's none of us are geared for it. So how do we, really, get that message across? How do we reach, our brethren, at an early enough stage where there it's not going to be as much of a stressful situation when it's time, to retire the uniform.
Well, I think some of it goes on. It goes back to the leadership of our current military. Develop systems and stuff like that. But I will say I think it complicates things when you talk about the fact that most people enlist between 18 and 24.
Yeah.
And when you're that old, you're an adult, you think you know everything about life. I think we're
Ev-
all there. In hindsight, I can sit here in my late 30s and tell you, I don't think I really kind of figured, things really didn't click to me until I was about 30, a couple years after I got out. That I kind of figured out who I was as a person, what my mission and my passion was in life, right? That was a couple years after I got out. I
mhm.
definitely didn't know at 22 or 23,
Yeah.
but the mindset of somebody at that age typically is, oh, it's fine. I got plenty of time. I got my whole life ahead of me. And, you know, I know what's best for me.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
want to listen to the old guy in the room, right? Like,
Yeah.
don't preach to me about like what I need to do.
Yeah.
You
Move on,
know,
pops. Keep that moving.
I know it's like, you know,
Tell your
we're only
story.
giving this advice because we care and we don't want you to see you make the same mistakes we made. You know, yeah, it's coming from a place of love, not just trying to chastise somebody, and whatnot. But
Uh,
there's challenges there with that
and then
age.
the conditioning too, what we condition ourselves for. I was always a caregiver. So I always had a family. I went from raising my little sister. My first family, it was a ready-made family. I adopted my daughter at age 20. Got with her mom. Married her mom, and then went into another similar scenario right after that. So I was conditioned for that. So I was always working more for someone else and planning more for someone else's livelihood than necessarily just my own. I always kind of was kind of geared to kind of thrive for to make sure I was able to provide for someone else. It worked. It helped. Whatever you find to drive you, find something to drive you.
Absolutely.
And then and talk about the conditioning and then our comfort zone. So once when I reached the point where I was retiring, I was single. So I had to really find, I had to dig deep and find other reasons to strive, well, myself, my own livelihood. And I gotta be honest, that wasn't as easy to do, you know. And we talk about, mental health too, and and our upbringing and things that we experience, and some of these things that go unnoticed really can hold us back, and, and cause us to get in our own way. And I certainly experienced that. I got in my own way quite a bit. It didn't have to be as tough for me. I created my own roadblocks, and and there was a point where I spiraled. I had tremendous opportunities that they came and went, and they went largely because of me and choices that I made. But and ultimately it led me to checking myself into the VA. I had untreated and undiagnosed PTSD and other things. And it really gave me the chance to hit a reset button and look at some of the choices I was making and why I was making them, and they give me the opportunity to actually just look at it and like, oh, okay. And then once, because if you're not aware of it, then you're just gonna keep doing what you've been doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I was glad to and really grateful to have that opportunity. I spent several months in the VA, here in Massachusetts, and it was eye opening, and I got a chance to see a lot of my brothers and sisters in that program and really connect with them. But I also got a chance to see that many of us recycle through those same programs. Don't it's kind of like becomes a vicious cycle. Some of us don't learn how to really move forward. It was my plan going in. I'm going to do this once. I'm going to absorb it. I'm going to commit and submit to it. More importantly, submit to it. What the hell do I know? Because what I thought I knew got me here. So now I'm gonna listen, absorb, and submit, so that I don't have to do this again, and I can move forward. And I set goals while I was in there, goals that I've achieved since then. And this was in 2017, the summer of 2017. That's where I spent my summer. I spent my summer at the VA, but invaluable. And that's something that the rest of society may not necessarily have access to without having to pay an ungodly amount of money for it.
I can't imagine what that would cost on the outside.
Exactly. And then I had the luxury, again, the added blessing of having a pension, a disability check as well, that I could, coast on, while, who could afford to stop working for that long? Because you have to really commit and, again, submit. You're in that program. And so I
Well,
could really,
that's probably where where you had success though, is you had yourself in a position where you knew this is a one time thing. Like I'm going in, and I'm ripping this band-aid off, and it's gonna hurt, but I'm gonna reflect inward, and I'm gonna work on myself, and I'm gonna be out in one shot.
yeah.
Whereas I'd make the argument if people are just recycling back through there, they're never really fully getting to that point where they're saying, look, I got a problem, and I'm going to fully deal with these problems.
Mhm. And they still know everything. You got to, at some point, you have to drop all that pride and whatever it is you carry, that ego, and just say either I want to get better or I don't. Either I want to survive and thrive, I want to be here, or not. I was 50 when I went through the program, and I just knew, had I not, I wouldn't have seen my 51st birthday. Knew it. I just knew it. I felt it, and I like being here. There's a lot that I enjoy about being here. Even on my worst day, I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, you got a long, you got a lot of life left to live, and a lot of impact that you can make on this world. And it's sad that some people have the blinders on and they never see that. And they get to that point where they are gone too soon, or they see some issues and then they go into the VA and they just go cycle right back through it because they're just not fully committed.
Or there's only
So
one piece of that program they want. Wintertime hits and they need somewhere warm to go. You know, uh, it's just there are a number of reasons, but um, but from what I've seen, more often than not, it's not the reason of them really wanting to just live a great quality of life. It's just, I need to get through this moment. I need to get to the next day, or I need to get through this season. It's short term thinking and short term planning.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of people that go through this world like that. I can't imagine that. Just like not having some sort of a plan or an idea or written goals of like where I want to be. Like even
Yeah,
if they're not written, like I have in my mind what I want to do with my life.
yeah,
What I want my legacy to be when I'm gone. Hopefully, when I'm really, really old and decrepit. when, when I can no longer move on my own and living in a facility or something like that, I guess. But like I don't know. I mean, I just see like, hey, there's still plenty of life left. Like I said, I'm in my late 30s, so I still have 30 something years till I retire.
yeah,
And then I've got the God willing, 10, 15, 20 more years to go do retired people stuff, whatever that looks like, you know. And
Uh,
like that's a lot of time left on earth to make an impact and meet people and experience things and like I don't know. That's just me in the back of my mind. I personally like I look that far into the future of like what's life gonna be like for me.
And see, here's the thing: the beauty of that VA program is that it addresses these things and it gives you the opportunity to set goals. You have your individual counselors and that will literally sit down with you and try to coach you into coming up with a plan. Just something that's going to work for you and something that you're willing to commit to. And I was fully committed. Like this, I want to do X, Y, and Z. This is the things I want to fix. These are the things I want to improve. These are goals I want to set and achieve. So I was absolutely committed to that. Had them written down and ticked them off one at a time. And I would just love. You can't force anybody to do anything. It's an old cliche, leading the horse to water and everything. But how do you get somebody to embrace it?
That's a good question. I was thinking about asking if you had any advice on, you know, for those people who have gone through that cycle, like how do they break that cycle and start looking at the future? But I guess it's got to be something like really deep inside of you to just be like, all right, enough. Like today's the day. Like I'm making changes. I don't know that there really is an answer. It's just got to be deep within.
Yeah, I mean, it can't hurt for them, well, for us to have someone to connect with that, because uh, that's on a similar path or has similar wants, kind of a battle buddy. Yes.
Yeah,
Somebody's got your back and it's gonna, kind of hold you accountable. You can hold each other accountable. Hey, check in on each other. Hey, so you said you wanted to do X, Y, Z. You had these goals. How are you doing with that? What's your plan? For the next thing. I think something like that would be helpful. Thing
and I think
is,
it's probably something that's really missing with a lot of people that are
yeah,
cycling through there, where they probably don't have that battle buddy, you know, that they served with, or just you know anybody who did serve, or just maybe close family connections, or they've you know ripped or shredded those family connections apart because of
whatever.
whatever whatever their substance abuse issue is, or mental health issue, whatever. You know, they just don't have that person to lean on to that can hold them accountable.
But we do tend to isolate, which is
Yes, we
dangerous.
do.
We tell ourselves, "Oh no, so and so doesn't has no idea what I'm going through, what I've been through. Don't know what it's like to serve, and all these things, or they haven't walked my walk." There are things we can tell ourselves, but if we could, I'm sure if somewhere in our circle, whether close or extended circle, that I would venture to guess would care enough to follow up with us and check in on us if they were given the opportunity.
Yeah, well, I think you know when you find that person, you found your battle buddy.
Yeah,
You found
and
that
it may
person that
not be
really cares
somebody who
enough about
served.
you.
It may not be somebody who served. If we can open our minds a little bit and just embrace another human soul.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's there's resources out there. I mean, outside of just you know mental health resources with the VA, because it could be your counselor,
Yeah,
it could be your spouse, it could be your parents, it could be you know maybe you have an adult child, you know, but like yeah, I've been going through the VA's whole health program, you know, very all encompassing. I think I've met with my lady like 7 or 8 times. We still haven't made it through the initial packet of information,
yeah,
but we just talk about so many different things, and it's just a wonderful lady to talk to, you know, and it's just like that just is an example of just I feel better, and it's not like it's a mental health thing either. Like we just talk about different things, just you know weight loss and eating healthy and exercise and what's going on in my family and you know dealing with different things. Like it's you know the whole health thing, but it's impactful just to have that one person that I could vent to that I don't even know where this lady lives. You know, all I know her through is the screen. That's it. You
yeah.
know, and we talk every you know 3 4 weeks, whatever, and it, you know just kind of catch up. And uh, I don't think she served at all. Just a civilian lady who works for the VA doing that. You know, and it just kind of helps to vent.
Yeah,
So you know you can find that person anywhere. You know, that to me that's just one of my people that I talk to that makes me feel a little bit better.
yeah, yeah. That I think that is so critical. we're a social species. We're not, we're not isolated, as creatures who isolate, by nature. We need other people.
Yeah, but we do need to get. I don't know how you get to the bottom of it, but you mentioned self isolation. That is such a huge one. I mean, I hear of that, or I hear people talk frequently,
Hmm.
and I pick up on that. Like, I think this person's isolating a lot,
Yeah,
and it's like I
it's safe. It feels safe. Then no one's gonna judge you or talk about whatever you're doing, how if you're using or how much you're drinking or what you could be doing better, for your own improvement for your own life. You're judgment free if it's just you.
absolutely. And sometimes it
It's,
may be hard to like tell. Like, do you really do it? Like, I hate to give another example myself, but I work a lot in my office. My office is down in the basement.
yeah,
So sometimes I'm down here, it may look like self isolation, but I'm actually working. Other
yeah.
times, I can flat out tell you, other times, I'm self isolating in my basement. I'm down here playing video games, or I'm get stuck on Facebook, or whatever thing that I got into. But like, this is my safe spot. This is where I'm at. 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day. Some days, it's just it is.
Yeah,
So sometimes it may be hard for people to see because of their environment. Maybe it's work. Maybe it's a hobby that they do. That some of it's they do it because they for a good reason. But let me spend a little extra time at something that that's really self isolation.
yeah. Even today, with all the improvements I like to say that I have made, I still have to be mindful of when I'm isolating. It's an easy thing to fall back into.
Absolutely. And I've heard some places too where people are like, well, I'm just an introvert. Are you though? You know what I mean? Like, I've
Yeah,
met some people. It's like, I know this person's not an introvert, right? They've just got that personality. They're always happy go lucky and social when they're around people. But they're like, I'm an introvert. It's like, I don't know about
I'm not so
that.
sure.
Don't know about that, but whatever. So, yeah, that's definitely some big issues in our community for sure.
Yeah, but I tell you what, man, I haven't met a single veteran that's not worth saving and not worth keeping on this planet and not worth embracing and loving and being grateful to and for.
Absolutely. I think sometimes people just, it's hard to say, what people actually think about when they unfortunately unalive themselves. But I think if you get that desperate, you might think that people don't care about you or you don't have anybody. If you really stop and think about it, you probably do. You got
Yeah,
two people right here that care. We may not know you at all, but we
mm,
don't want you to be gone.
yeah,
We want you to to get better, go get the help and improve your life. And sometimes there's outside factors that can influence what happens in a person's life, for sure. But there's
absolutely.
also an element of you taking accountability for it and pushing through. And some things can be temporary.
Yeah. And
You
I
know,
think another thing that's kind of important, because the military life is obviously very rigid in a number of ways. And we'll judge ourselves harshly, and if we can learn to show ourselves a little compassion and try not to judge ourselves, and just give ourselves a hug, give ourselves that mental hug, say, hey, and remind ourselves of the positive things we have done, our achievements, no matter how small it may appear or feel. You know, I got my ass up this morning. I put my feet on the deck. Good on you, Mike.
that's a good point. Be grateful every day you get to get up, right?
And how about this one? You're one of less than 1% of the population who serve. That's an achievement. How many sperm did you get out to be here? Did you beat out to get here? You're a winner. Keep it simple, keep it small, but be proud and of your achievements. Be proud of the fact that you're here, that you're still here, that you're served, and there's somebody out there that will find you worth loving and embracing and showing compassion to.
I think it's funny that you mentioned the sperm because I've heard Gary Vaynerchuk mention that. I can't remember the numbers, but
Yeah,
it's like it's astronomical odds that you even get born.
Exactly.
For any person to get born.
Higher than winning
And
the lottery.
yeah, I know, right? It's like it's crazy. You already won the lottery. but seriously, like then you're born, and then in some ways in this world that we've lived in the last at least almost 40 years that I've been alive, like the fact that you even make it to being an adult is one thing, and then if
Oh,
you're a veteran, you make it through boot camp and your tech school, your AIT, whatever, C school, whatever it's called, and then you make it to the operational military, and then
mm,
you do your 4, 6, 20 years.
yeah,
Especially for anybody who's deployed or done a fairly dangerous job. Stop and think about how many times you've almost died.
right?
That'll give you some gratitude real quick. Be like,
Yeah.
I've probably died, come pretty darn close to dying, you know, an exponentially larger amount than my civilian counterparts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here, 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 and amen to that.
Yep. So have a little
Yeah,
gratitude. Start your day with some gratitude, right?
yeah. And
That's a good
we're
way. Good way. That's a good way to start. So, I know that there were some other things when we talked a few weeks ago. Kind of little things that you mentioned. I kind of want to get your take on. One of the things that you kind of mentioned is, when we go in the military, our operations tempo, is going 1,000 miles an hour. And when you get
oh,
out, you're basically stopping. You're going from 1,000 to zero. So,
exactly. Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? Because I think it's a huge thing that we need to keep in mind. And
Thank you for mentioning that again. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes. So, this high operational tempo and everything we do is planning for the inevitability of war. And so the adrenaline is pretty much always pumping. Sleep deprivation going days upon days without sleep. And it's like, yeah, here, you pumped, you're ready to go. What's going on? What's going on? And then, it's always go, 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 and keeping your sea bag packed and all of that. And then next thing, okay, you're a civilian. Nobody around you is doing that. Nothing that you're gonna do on the outside, short of, fighting forest fires or something like that, or so, is gonna, have you at that kind of high, sustained adrenaline rate.
yeah, even your highly functioning, highly successful civilians might only be operating at, I'll just pick an arbitrary number, but they might be operating at 150 miles an hour versus the 1,000 that you were operating at.
Exactly. And then so now all of a sudden you slam on the brakes, and so you're conditioned. And now how do I keep that same excitement going? And that, so that's why so many of my brothers and sisters turn to, alcohol and substances and other risk taking behavior and other things to just kind of, you know, to replace that without really taking a look at it and finding, maybe some healthier alternatives, to get that, that rush. There are a number of other ways to do it that won't put yourself and others in danger. So yeah, and because I faced that too. That was part of my world until I was able to take a look at it and say, hey, off the brakes, Jeff. Let's find another way. But not everybody, pumps the brakes in time. So we lose a lot of our brothers and sisters. Either to uh, suicide, very sadly, or some kind of predicament or situation they've gotten themselves into that ends their lives. You know, this is something that definitely should be addressed in the whole transition process, and it is not. But I think it's critical to introduce that and at least have it, as a consideration, as a thought, as people plan to transition out. Those landmines. Beware of these landmines. Here's some of the landmines. Here's where they're at. This is kind of a way. Here's some ways you can sidestep them.
That is definitely one of those things that can happen. And I agree with you that they need to redesign somehow. I don't know that I've got the answers on how, but I think when it comes to that, the, the easiest answer that I've got
Yeah.
is develop a system to really lengthen the transition process somehow. Which I know is complicated because, when you're getting somebody out of the military or they're retiring, there's a finite end date to that. But maybe pull somebody out of those roles, especially the really high tempo jobs, and ease them into more of a 9-to-5 job. Maybe ease them into, well, I was Air Force, so, some of the services and stuff, sometimes instead of wearing fatigues or dress uniforms, they'd be wearing like polo shirts that would say,
Mm.
the gym name or something. They would wear khaki pants. It was a uniform of sorts, but it was more like a business casual kind of thing. I've thought about that in transition as well. If you get people out of uniform in the TAPS program, you know,
Yeah.
a different environment, a different tempo.
Yeah.
It would take a while, I would argue, that for some longer for some than others to even out that tempo and not require all that adrenaline and excitement and all that stuff. It's not a perfect fix, but something that was a few weeks, few months. I mean, look, you join the military today, and I think the shortest is 8.5, and I think the Marines are 13 weeks,
Yeah.
right? So you're spending more than 2 months completely relearning who you are and being broken down and built up. But we don't
Excellent.
have a process for that on the way out.
You got 3 days.
Basically. And a handful of TAPS classes to learn how to write a resume and put on a suit.
That's what I'm saying. Those 3 days of tap class. That's
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
Those 3 short days of tap class.
yeah.
But no, that's an excellent point. Excellent point.
I don't know if it
Two
needs to be an 8-week thing or 12-week thing, 16-week. I don't know.
two to
But if
3
you had
months
people
transition
start,
in. I'm sorry.
oh, I was just saying, I mean, if you just had a long period like that where it was like a civilian boot camp, right? Where I guess I've thought about it a little bit over the years, but like maybe the first few weeks you come in your uniform, then you start coming in your dress uniform, and then you transition to something like, or maybe you just start off with just like khakis and a polo shirt.
Yeah.
Everybody's wearing the same thing. And then like halfway through the program, you get to start wearing whatever civilian clothes you want as you get closer to that retirement date or separation date. But then, those night shift guys automatically switch to a day shift. Everybody's there, 9 to 5. Treat it more like a civilian job versus military. None of your leadership is wearing a uniform. They
Yeah.
may still be in uniform and may be a position for them. I don't know, but or you get civilian volunteers or something like that where, your day is semi-scripted and you can just kind of step it down.
I think that's awesome. That's an awesome idea. Because like I said, when you come off the street and to join the military, it's a 2 to 3 month transition. Starting with the uniform change.
Yeah.
Haircuts. Well, if you want to call it that.
Well, maybe for the ladies, for the guys, it's just straight off. But
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you call it a haircut. But I mean, there should be something, and I would think, basic, economics or money, the money side of it, would save the VA and our country a lot of money combating veteran suicide and substance abuse and homelessness if you gave more resources to try and curb that. If you did it right during that transition process, unfortunately, there'd be nothing for those people that are already out, but you could do it for the future generations at least.
Yeah.
And give
Absolutely.
them a better fighting chance of transition.
Because our service members are such a huge financial investment and resource. You think they work hard to find a way to take better care of their resources. So I think that would be an excellent plan to present.
Well, hopefully we'll get some politicians that will listen to this and they can make the changes in their own way.
I think it's doable. And I think now is a good time for it.
I mean, even if you kept somebody in service, or you take somebody off of the books, the manpower books, 2 months or 3 months earlier than what you expect, let them take their terminal leave afterwards, whatever. I don't know, but
Mm.
you know, you're already paying them, so
Maybe it could be part of their terminal leave. Maybe they could be incentivized to go through this program.
could be, yeah. I'm sure they could come up with a way,
Absolutely.
but
That's smart. And we've got some smart people in Washington
yeah,
and other places, throughout the military.
something like that's not going to affect everybody, right? You'll still have people that'll fall through the cracks and have those problems.
Absolutely.
It's not going to fix your mental health issues. It's not going to fix your physical health issues, but it could give you the right mindset potentially for transition. It could slow that tempo down. It could, ease you into that that role. I mean, I know if you take that uniform off and you've been wearing it for 22 years, and the
Yeah.
next day you got to go into work wearing khakis and a polo shirt,
Hmm.
it's just going to feel different.
Yeah. Tremendously different. But I tell you what, building someone's confidence and giving them hope. I mean, that's a healthcare, mental health plan, all to itself.
That it is. That would have a tremendous impact. So, it's, maybe somebody with the power will listen to this sometime and make those changes and implement something. We'll just cross our fingers and hope. Unfortunately, most of the TAP stuff right now, it's all ran by the Department of Labor, actually, which is why it's all focused on just employment and create your LinkedIn profile, get a suit, and learn how
Yeah.
to do a job interview and write a resume.
Good luck. We're all counting on you.
Yeah, I know, right? Go do big things. So,
Yeah. Yes.
but just one of the issues that we face. Another one I wanted to talk about. You brought up when we talked before was relationships. You've
Mm.
been married a couple times, some toxic relationships. I know that's not an uncommon thing for some people. What can you share about what you went through there and what people might be able to do to
Yeah. So I can speak for
navigate that?
myself and just speaking from my own personal experience and just knowing that understanding there are a number out there who've been, who've had similar experiences, and not really knowing what a healthy relationship looks like. Even from growing up, and and carrying that into own, personal, romantic, intimate relationships. Just not really knowing what that looks like, or how to develop and cultivate one. There's a lot of barbed wire in there. And it leaves scars, and that can leaves its own degree of PTSD. You know, we're looking at that from we're from a number of different angles as far as the whole PTSD thing. It doesn't come just from our military experience, combat or other traumas that many may experience while on active duty or reserves or whatever the case may be. It comes, a lot of it comes from within our own interpersonal circle. Like, I've been married a number of times. I've got a few T-shirts on that one, and these are things that I, just hadn't seen. There are patterns that if we're not made aware of, or become aware of, we just keep repeating the same things. And with everything else, like say, we stack that on top of whatever we experience while serving, and it compounds, and it can leave us feeling bewildered, lost, alone, isolated, and at times hopeless. And so finding, so yeah, relationships are critical. I mean, a lot of us judge ourselves and our ability to maintain a relationship or even be in a relationship. And I had to consider whether I even needed to or wanted to be in a relationship at some point because of what the types of relationships I was choosing, and some of the dynamics of that, and the impact on our choices I was making as a result. You know, People can bring their own brand of toxicity to you and your world, and then all of a sudden it becomes, become part owner. And so that's something to be mindful of too. Who we're spending time with, who we're engaging with, and who we let into our world, because not everybody, is meant to be in our circle. Not everybody's meant to be, under our roof, or we don't need to spend time with certain people, because certain people can bring out the best in us, and there are others who can bring out the absolute worst in us.
Absolutely, you got to think about that too when you're transitioning. You're probably, unless you're guard or reserve and you're back, by your home of record, you're probably PCSing or moving back to your hometown where you haven't been for 4 years or 20 years. You know, are those friends, those family members, those connections you have back home, are they the same person? Are you the same person?
Hmm.
Is it was it a toxic relationship before that you just need to just not entertain a
Yeah,
relationship with now?
yeah,
Because you haven't been around them for so many years. Just be
yeah,
careful, tread lightly there.
absolutely. Or go somewhere else. I
There's that. That's an option.
going going back to my home record was not really a consideration for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Chicago, born and raised. And New England just became my home. I spent, my last 3 years in the Navy here. I came here from Okinawa after being in Okinawa for 5.5 years. But I fell in love with the area for a number of reasons. There's a ton of opportunity here, especially if you're in healthcare. I mean, goodness gracious, this is the healthcare mecca. And just I love a change of seasons. New England definitely offers that. Um, but it also got me. It gave me a fresh start. It- you know, I don't think that going back home would have been the best thing for me.
Yeah, definitely not. Probably not a good thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, so
I mean, I came back home, but now I'm 45 minutes away from where well, the town that I went to high school in, but 25, about 25 minutes away from the house I grew up in, 45 minutes away from the school I went to.
okay.
I don't go to that town very often. I got nothing in that town for me.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like every time I drive through, I'll be like, wow, this town looks different than what it did. I wouldn't want to raise I wouldn't want to raise my kids there. I wouldn't want to live there.
yeah,
That was another chapter in my life. I'm in a different place, different goals, different things now.
yeah. We got to consider family too. A lot of us will go home just because our family is there, but when you mention toxic relationships, it doesn't have to be just out, people you grew up around, had friends or whatever. It can, more often than not, it's family. So just to be mindful and just, really, it's hard to, for a lot of us to do, but we really do have to learn how to put ourselves first and, and our needs first, our mental health. And,
I wish there's a good recipe for describing to people how to do that.
oh,
Unfortunately, that's just a path you just got to go down, right?
well, there is
But
a
like we do need
pretty,
to do that.
I've I just kind of adopted a formula for myself. It's just basically something works or it doesn't work. If it makes me feel a certain, if it adds to my world, if it brings something positive to my world, okay, yeah, fine. And especially if it's mutually, beneficial. Um, but if it takes from me in some way, if it makes me feel negative, makes me feel bad, makes me hurt or something, that doesn't work. And there are people who want you to sacrifice, fall on the sword to make them feel better, to stuff your own feelings and what's important to you, just so we all have had someone like that in our lives. And for me that doesn't work. That's why I never make it personal. I really do keep it just that simple. Either it works or it doesn't work. It's healthy or it's not healthy. It's beneficial and promotes growth or it doesn't.
It's a good point. I would add on you have to weigh the stress of it too. You know what I mean?
Abs-
Like even things that are beneficial may add a lot of stress to your life.
yeah,
Maybe time, maybe effort, whatever. But if the end result is potentially positive, it may be worth it to go through that stress. But
yeah,
if it doesn't bring you any joy and just adds stress to your life,
yeah.
drop that like a sack of hot potatoes.
If
Like you
it's
don't
not,
need it. Be
yeah,
done.
not putting money in your pocket, bread on your table, making you feel better in some way, I'd say it's probably not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very huge life lesson right there to learn. Take it
Yeah,
from the old guys. I mean, I just did that a couple years ago. I was involved in my HOA. I love my community. I love my neighbors. But it got to a point where I got burned out on it.
yeah,
And, I was, to me, it was just like, all right, I'm done. Like, I don't really care anymore. You know,
yeah,
that was time for me to leave. When it added
yeah.
more stress for me to prepare and go to the meeting, and brought nothing of value to me, I was like, okay,
I
time,
absolutely
time for
get
me
it.
to step away and somebody else to step in.
Yeah, I tell you what, it took a lot of emotional and mental ass whoopings for me to get here to be able to make that decision. I'm just
It's a good way to put it.
yeah, and because people will go crane style on you with mentally and emotionally, just for their own whatever, either amusement, entertainment, to get something out of you, whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. The reason doesn't matter. Again, it works or it doesn't work.
Absolutely. That's yeah. It either works or it doesn't work. That's some good advice. And man, we hit a lot of good things. I really hope that, especially the young troops that are in right now, listen to this, and take really take a lot of this to heart. There's a lot you can learn about the transition process, and we haven't even covered anywhere near everything you could possibly cover that you
No,
could run into. But just I guess the one thing everybody needs to know is that millions of guys have done it before you. A lot of people have done it successfully, but a lot of people have hit those landmines. So, get your battle buddy, learn, be educated, and have the right mindset. Easier said than done.
yeah, but so worth it. Absolutely worth it. You're
Yeah,
worth it. You're worth it.
absolutely. Because then you get to join the greatest, um, I guess to say organization or fraternity, whatever you want to say. I don't want to exclude the ladies, but like the greatest club. We're veterans.
It is.
We are a
Yeah.
very small percentage of our population. We all have a lot of tremendous things in common. We all served at different times, different branches, did different jobs, but we all share a lot of very similar things in common. And yeah,
And it takes
it's
less than
it's
30 seconds for us to realize we're not strangers once we get to talking.
I know, right? I was like, yeah,
We're
you get
family.
some absolutely like you just feel comfortable, even if you're just walking around somewhere and somebody's got something on, a t-shirt or hat and something like you're like, you guys probably a vet. Like, there's just an instant like, okay, there's somebody in here who gets me. There's
Yeah.
somebody in here who's gonna have my back. Somebody in here that if some if some shit goes down,
I
they're
know
not gonna run. They
I'm
may not
going.
run the other way. You know
Yeah, I
what I
know
mean?
I got
Like,
my back in this room. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's a weird comfort to that. There really is.
But it's comfort no less.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before we recorded. Like, I took my kids out to Mission Barbecue for Veterans Day. And I don't think didn't share this with you, but I was just sitting there. I was like, do you guys realize how many badasses are in this room right now?
Right?
I was like, this whole damn restaurant is full of guys who served all the way from, one of my buddies, Gene Neely, he's, 98 years old, World War II veteran, all the way to some pretty young guys that probably got out in the last, 3 or 4 years,
Hmm.
walked through that door. I'm like, you're in the presence of, some men and women who have fought in every war. Every branch is represented here, and you're probably in the damn near the safest restaurant in town.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the last place some knucklehead wants to start some crap. This is the
Exactly,
last. This is the
exactly.
last place they want to start it.
And then everybody's instant friends. The funny thing, like my kids are like, "Does everybody know here? Everybody here?" And I'm like, "I don't know half the guys in this room." The guys are coming in, they're like waving across the room, and other people waving back and forth. I mean, I knew a bunch of people there. It's like we're a small community. If you get out and you're actually in your community and kind of just try and connect with other vets in different ways, like it's kind of funny. Just the guy who sat down at my table, I interviewed him a few weeks ago on this podcast. He's a local guy. We volunteer together. Like, he walked in, and my World War II buddy, and a bunch of other people I've met here and there. And then later on that day, I ran into a Navy veteran who's a local singer, and
Hmm.
you
How
know,
about
it's
it?
yeah. So it's a small world. So,
It is.
but man, I appreciate you coming on here. I'm gonna throw this up here. You got your website here at the bottom, Safety Net Solutions. Can you tell us a little bit about what Safety Net Solutions is?
Yeah. Safety Net Solutions started in 1992, incorporated in 96. It's IT, software development, and DevOps company. We created a lot of things. We've done a fair amount of work since for the past few decades for the FAA, both directly and indirectly. We build solutions, and we just kind of pride ourselves on solving problems. No matter how big, how small, we have a team of engineers that are just nothing short of phenomenal, and have solved some really big problems that some head scratches for others that others were not able to figure out, and somehow they came up with a solution, and so we've been done mostly government work. Right now, we're all going to serve nonprofits as well to help them with their mission by eliminating waste and streamlining because they have small budgets, small staff, but big missions. You know, so how can you make that? How can you make that happen? You can automate processes. You can build a solution. You can build apps, and just make the world better because they're making the world better. I've spent a lot of time around nonprofits, since I've retired from the Navy in 2009. Spent a lot of time on boards, volunteering, and you name it. And I just find it deeply and richly rewarding. I volunteer every Saturday at a food pantry. Spend a fair amount of time there. That's work too.
Yeah, that would be.
That's a workout, but I
Yeah.
love it. I enjoy it. My church that I attend, helping them with some things as well. Uh, and of course, my background in healthcare, I just bought the company in the past year. From my friend, business partner, Ross Miller. He founded the company, and I can't, his brain is just it blows. Sometimes I feel like a toddler when I'm talking to him. It's like, tell me again, but tell me slower, right?
So he's literally the smartest guy in the room every time. You know, one of those
He
guys
really is.
where you're just like, damn, how do they get so much knowledge in their head?
He
You
really
know?
is. And things that excite him are things that just make other people want tie their brains in a knot. It's like he finds these things exciting. He's that guy, and I like to connect people to him. Because I kind of my job is to pimp his brain essentially. yeah, this
Somebody's
is
got
what.
that much knowledge in the industry, yeah, you suck every piece of knowledge you can get out of them, right?
Yeah, and he's a tremendous mentor as well. So I'm new to running an organization, owning an organization of this caliber, but I find it very exciting, and I just look forward to the other ways we can make an impact, make it just make a difference. We just want to make a difference.
Awesome. Well, making a difference is a good thing. It's
Yeah,
never a bad thing. So I guess I'll just ask for anybody who happens to be listening or watching. Of course, this could be any time in the future too. But are you looking for any employees right now? I mean, especially with tech stuff, a lot of that's getting out with some technical skills and stuff like that. Or
yeah. We're always looking for software engineers. Now we've got some opportunities where for mechanical engineers, uh, uh, network engineers. There's always opportunity.
I kind of figured so. Which
Yeah,
I was like, oh well, tech stuff. I mean, man, there's always a need for tech people, right?
yeah, yeah.
In this day and age.
Web developers. Yes.
Absolutely. So, well, there you have it, folks. If you're interested in something like that, just check out the website. Um, Jeffrey, I appreciate you coming on here and kind of sharing a little bit of your transition story, and hopefully we've lit up the trail a little bit for some other people.
I really
Give you some
appreciate you
some
having me.
ideas to look out for and landmines to avoid.
I really appreciate you having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. It's one that really needs to be had. So thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing. And I hope every veteran is able to see this and take something from it.
Well, there's more than enough nuggets of information there you can take from it.
At least one or
Improve your
two.
life, and that's my goal. I mean, that's seriously the goal of this podcast is just educate or inspire, and help our brothers and sisters out there just make that next step to improving their lives, whatever that looks like. So,
Yeah. Whatever it looks like for
today's
them.
topic is transition. So I appreciate it, and thanks for being a guest.
Thank you. You have a great rest of the day, month, year, holiday season.
You too.
All right. Take
Yep.
care.
All right, there you go, folks. I hope you enjoyed that episode. There's definitely a lot to unpack with transition. We barely touched, every aspect of it. Remember, on my website, you got all kinds of resources, battlebuddypodcast.net. As I always say, if there's not a resource on there you think should be, reach out, let me know. And if you're struggling, remember the National Suicide Hotline number is 988-PRESS-1. Remember, we want you here tomorrow. So if you're struggling, call that number and get your help.